All right, perfect. And thank you all again for coming. This is a webinar on Venture for America 101. And prior to beginning, let me display my screen so that you all can see. All right, and so again, thank you all for coming. This webinar will really talk about the basics of Venture for America, who we are, what our mission is, what we do as a fellowship program. And so just kind of some starting points. If you all do have any questions throughout the presentation, I more than encourage you to use the Q&A feature at the bottom in order to ask different kinds of questions. And should you all also want to engage with one another, or if you have a comment, feel free to use the chat feature. I've been seeing a lot of individuals connect with each other over LinkedIn, so you're also more than welcome to do that as well in order to really, again, further engage with one another. However, all of that kind of said, again, thank you all for coming, and today should be a good presentation. And so before kind of diving into the content, just to kind of go over some introductions and whatnot, my name is Joel Vasquez. I go by pronouns he, him, and his, and I am the Diversity and Inclusion Recruitment Manager here at Venture for America. And I'll also introduce my other colleagues here, starting with Devin. So Devin, if you want to go ahead and tell your name, pronouns, position, and what city you're based in, we'll kick it off from there.
Yeah, hi everyone. Great to meet you all virtually. My name is Devin Malloy, as Joel said. I go by she, her pronouns, and I am a 2019 fellow in Detroit. I work at Digital Onboarding as a senior account manager.
All right. No, thank you, Devin. And Aya will be our third panelist, and she'll be joining us a little bit later. However, kind of until then, I'll also kick it off to my colleague, Riel, and she can introduce herself as well.
Hi, everyone. My name is Riel Norton. I'm the Senior Talent Associate here at Venture for America.
All right, perfect. So, all right, everyone, thank you all. And so just to kind of give you a little bit of an overview in terms of what we're going to talk about today, I'm first going to address the mission and overview of Venture for America and what our larger goal is. And then we're going to go into more components regarding the fellowship program, like what is Match, for example? What is training camp? What is life like as an actual Venture for America fellow? What is Launch in particular? And what is it like to start up your own organization and company should you have a business idea that you want to explore? And then last but not least, I'm going to hand it over to my colleague Riel, who's going to moderate a question and answer session with both Aya and Devin. And so again, should you all have any questions throughout the conversation, please don't hesitate to put it in the Q&A feature. However, let's get started. What is Venture for America's mission, and what do we aim to ultimately do at the end of the day? And so VFA is really an organization that seeks to create inclusive economic development and opportunity within different cities in the United States by really mobilizing and building the next generation of entrepreneurs and startup leaders through equipping them with the skills, tools, and resources that they need to create jobs. And we primarily do this through our fellowship program, in that we really facilitate and introduce people to the startup community so that by the end of their 2 years, they either are leaders within the startup world or they want to become an entrepreneur and create their own organization. And we tend to focus on 14 different cities within the United States. And these are cities like Baltimore, Cincinnati, Cleveland, Columbus, Miami, New Orleans, Philadelphia, St. Louis, and so on and so forth. And the reason why we tend to focus on these cities specifically is that unlike cities like San Francisco and New York City, these cities typically don't necessarily see an attraction. A lot of individuals don't necessarily go to these cities or aren't attracted to them in the traditional sense that a lot of talent typically flows to San Francisco and New York City. However, at the same time, a lot of these cities have different startup ecosystems that lend their support to different organizations and small businesses. And so in order to really accomplish our mission, we really funnel talent into these cities so that they get to work with local communities and startup organizations, thus building these organizations and thereby creating different jobs through the success of these startups and promoting local economic development. And so that's kind of why we tend to focus on these specific cities and how these cities really add to our mission at the end of the day. And so some of what we look for is really that mission alignment. So although you might be interested in startups and although you might be interested in entrepreneurship, how do your interests connect to our mission at the end of the day? The second thing that we really look for within our fellowship program is that ability to contribute. So because within our fellowship, it does consist of you working at a startup organization for 2 years, we're really looking for individuals who know how to generate positive results. And that's really best illustrated by showing off a lot of quantifiable accomplishments within your resume. So for example, let's say that you were an event planner. How many events did you plan and how many attendees showed up? Let's say that you were doing social media for a student organization. What social media feeds did you utilize and how many followers were you able to gain for your organization overall? And last but not least, we're also looking for individuals who have certain characteristics. And those involve things like a growth mindset, having the ability to take feedback and use it to improve your own performance and your own development, being a lifelong learner, and valuing diversity, equity, and inclusion so that our fellowship community can truly be a place where everyone feels like they belong at the end of the day. And so these are the 3 pillars that we really look out for throughout our fellowship and application process. And so definitely take note if this is something that you do want to really look out for at the end of the day. And so when it comes to our application process overall, there are 4 main stages of our process. And so the first one is really in our activities, which primarily consists of you submitting some basic information about yourself. And that includes things like your name, your information, your email, as well as uploading your resume and showing us the impact that you made in 3 different activities. And assuming that you go beyond that, the next stage is an online essay in which you have about 7 days to write about, number 1, why you want to be a VFA fellow, and number 2, you get the opportunity to pitch yourself for a startup job and also potentially discuss a specific VFA city that you might be interested in or talk about our cities in general. And so should you move beyond the online essay stage, then there comes the video interview, which you all can think of as more of a conversation between you and either a VFA team member, alum, or fellow, so that we can get to hear more about that awesome experience that you might have and about your goals and motivations for you wanting to join the fellowship program overall. And then fourth and finally, we have a virtual selection day, which is the final stage of our application process. And so our virtual selection day is a full day of different group activities that you'll be undergoing with different applicants within a Zoom room. And you'll be participating in these activities and having a final individual interview in the afternoon, further talking about more of those goals and motivations that you shared previously. And so as you can kind of see, each of these stages really builds off one another in the sense that you're really getting more and more into knowing about the VFA community, and you're also sharing more about your experiences, your interests, and your motivations for wanting to join the fellowship overall, and what you could really gain from it and contribute to it as well. And so right now, we are in the midst of our 3rd deadline, and we're primarily within that first stage, which is really the activity section. And so assuming that you know a little bit more about VFA and what our application process entails, how does it actually introduce you to startups and how does it facilitate that connection? And that's actually where Match comes in. And so you all can really think of Match as an internal job search within VFA. And so VFA, the fellowship actually doesn't necessarily place you in a role or a specific city, but rather it really supports you in finding a job opportunity through one of our company partners. And so right now, when we calculated the data, there were more than 586 opportunities in 2019. And the way that match works and the way that you actually get matched to a startup opportunity is that every incoming fellow in April logs onto a private online job platform. And within that platform, they actually apply to different kinds of job opportunities that we as the VFA team have sourced for them. And these are full-time salary jobs with benefits. And so you're applying to these jobs, interviewing with the teams, and asking them different kinds of questions regarding the role, the culture, the team, and you're coached by the VFA team all the way throughout so that you're set up for success. And then by the end of match, you're hopefully receiving a couple of different job opportunities that could be good for your growth. And depending on the job that you accept and the location of that respective organization, that's going to determine where you're going to be in for the duration of your 2 years. And so while match is of course a time-intensive job search process, we as the VFA team, again, really support you within this process through not only coaching you, but also providing you with professional development resources on topics like negotiating an offer, or even resume reviews and mock interviews so that you can best know how to advocate for yourself and tell your story. And so this is a little bit about how we as the VFA team and as the fellowship would really introduce you into the startup community. And so all of that said, some fellow-only resources that you would have access to should you primarily go into the fellowship program include, of course, that private online job portal, resume reviews, and interview coaching that you get access to, VFA-only virtual job fairs in which you could meet several company partners in a day and learn and find out more about them through different informational interviews, as well as direct introductions to companies through our team of community directors who are primarily in charge of sourcing a lot of those opportunities that you can potentially apply for. And so in a lot of ways, VFA and the fellowship overall does really allow you to connect directly to different startup jobs as opposed to you simply applying to an email where you might never hear back. And so through kind of the fellowship program, you do get access to a lot of those opportunities that you might otherwise want, however, you don't necessarily have a direct connection to, which is really one of the more powerful benefits of entering into the fellowship program and really applying, in that VFA does become an on-ramp to entrepreneurship in the startup world at large. And so some of the companies in Match include, for the most part, for-profit organizations within the tech industry. And then occasionally there are some organizations that might be nonprofit, that might be along the lines of venture capital or an incubator, that might be social enterprise, and so on and so forth. And this graph kind of breaks it down really accurately in the sense that for-profit organizations comprise 75%, whereas the remaining 25% are again along the lines of the other fields that I mentioned. And in terms of industries represented, those mostly consist of, again, software and tech, education and education technology, healthcare and the medical device field, the food and beverage field, and the health and wellness field. And so if you do have an interest in one of these 5 different fields, then definitely you know that the fellowship is potentially for you. And of course, there are other fields as well that we are illustrated and reflected in the makeup of our company partners. However, you're going to tend to see more of these fields within our company partners represented. And so again, overall, there were about 586 job opportunities posted in Match last year, and we're currently tallying the number of job opportunities posted for the class of 2020. However, again, once we know that number, we'd be happy to share it. And so aside from that, now that we took care of Match and you got that startup job that you've really been craving and looking for, what is Training Camp and what is it actually like? So Training Camp is a program that happens after Match. So you went through Match in April, and Training Camp typically happens in July of every year. Now, some individuals are still going through Match and finding that job opportunity in Training Camp, and that's perfectly okay, as we want individuals to really find a good growth opportunity that best suits them. However, all of that said, Training Camp is really one of the first programs that all incoming fellows really go through as a class. And it's really a program wherein you really get to learn more of those hard and soft skills that you're going to need to succeed at a startup organization. And so you could learn different skills from different vendors like IDEO, the Y Combinator, and different founders within the entrepreneurial space so that they can really teach you about different kinds of skills like managing up, how to be a good startup employee or team member. What is it like in terms of taking on additional priorities, and how can I manage and budget my time? The second thing that you might really learn at training camp could be fostering an entrepreneurial mindset through different kinds of collaborative challenges. One specific challenge that a lot of individuals from training camp often go through is the website challenge, wherein a lot of fellows often have to collaborate with one another to build a website for a local entrepreneur within Detroit. And so the third thing that you also get to really focus on in training camp is investing in a lifelong community and really learning more about Venture for America's values. So throughout training camp, you're not only going to different workshops and you're not only collaborating with others to tackle on different challenges. However, you're also really focused on really building a lot of those relationships so that you can feel like you belong and so that you have that supportive community eventually when you transition to your respective city. And so all of that kind of said, that's a little bit about what training camp looks like. And it primarily takes place, again, mostly in July. And so after training camp, then that's formally when individuals typically start their startup jobs and enter into their cities in order to really get to know the building blocks of what it's like to build up an organization. And so what does life as a VFA fellow actually really look like? And what does it kind of entail? And so for life as a VFA fellow, again, you're going to primarily be working at a startup organization in a full-time salary job where you'll gain different valuable hands-on experience that you can really take throughout the rest of your career. And because it's going to be a startup, you're going to take on not just projects related to the scope of work that you're going to really address, but also you could be taking on adjacent priorities. You could be taking on different kinds of projects that might be something that you're interested in. However, that might be directly outside the scope of what you're really working on. And it provides kind of that valuable opportunity to become very versatile in the sense that you can kind of plug and play in any kind of different situation, which is only going to benefit you for different positions that you might really take on throughout your career. And then in addition to not only your startup job, but outside, you're also going to really go to different professional development events, and you're going to go to different kinds of activities that are set up by the community director within your city. This could be a workshop focused on design thinking. This could be a networking event focused on entrepreneurship. And this could be kind of a meet and greet with a local founder within your startup city. And so all of that said, for the purposes of COVID-19, we actually migrated a majority of our programming so that it is in a virtual space so that we can fully respect the safety of our fellows. However, in kind of the spare time outside work, that is definitely something that you can really have access to, while of course continuing to build relationships between you and your fellows within your respective city. And in addition to, of course, not only working at a startup job and attending different professional development events, however, in a lot of ways, you can also find different ways to dive into the startup ecosystem as well as make an impact within your specific city in ways that can really matter to you. One fellow that I know in Baltimore actually started a refugee film festival because that was a specific challenge within his city that he cared deeply about. In the time of COVID-19, a lot of individuals, specifically within Charlotte and Baltimore, are really making and volunteering different PPE equipment so that different hospitals and care facilities can have those resources that they need. And so in a lot of different ways, you not only kind of get to explore the workspace, but also what is it potentially like really making an impact within a city? And what is it like being socially responsible in that regard? And so all of that said, in terms of life after Venture for America, a lot of fellows often do different things. You could often be Danielle Bevins, who was a 2018 fellow, and she actually started working on her own company full time. And she's currently the co-founder of Bold Exchange, which is a platform that actually collates and really gathers different Black-owned businesses so that if individuals really want to buy from Black-owned businesses, then they can primarily go onto one platform and really browse through a number of different options that are really there. Or you could even become a startup leader like Alex Persky Stern. And so he is a fellow alum from the class of 2013, and he actually became the chief operating officer at Waymark, which is one of the company partners that we actually host in Detroit. And so he actually continued his growth throughout the startup community and eventually became a senior leader in that he's influencing the direction of the organization overall. And approximately 60% of fellow alums become startup leaders, and 13% also work on their own organization overall. In addition, you could also take those skills that you're learning and apply it elsewhere, like a larger tech firm or a larger organization like Molly Adar. And she's a fellow from the class of 2014, and she's a user experience designer at Amazon Web Services. And alternatively, there are also other pathways that aren't reflected on this slide. You could go to graduate school, you could also start your own business while working different side gigs. You could really take a lot of those skills that you're learning and apply it elsewhere. And so it primarily depends on what you would want to do. And we're really there to help you figure it out along the way. And so now that you've kind of seen life as a Venture for America fellow, what are kind of some of the resources that we have that can really help you start up your own organization and your own company? And so let's say that you are interested in potentially starting your own business or even creating that idea and really bringing it to life. And so some of the resources that we offer are, let's say, again, that you want to start your own business, you have access to quarterly hackathons with prize money, and VFA as a whole also introduces you to different pitch competitions that you can really go to in order to win prize money. We also have an exclusive accelerator program that you as a fellow alum can actually apply to. Danielle is actually one of the participants within our accelerator for this year. And our accelerator, for those who might not know, is a 4-month program lasting from August to November, wherein if it were in person, we would actually provide free housing, a living stipend, and office space so that participants can work on their business idea full time, all the way from validating it to even seeing whether it is financially sustainable. And so that program often allows different individuals to really jumpstart their business idea because they're able to dedicate the time and resources towards making it a living reality. And then after you potentially start your own organization or company, we also connect you to different investors, grants, and opportunities to really campaign so that you can continue to build on its success and earn further money so that you can, again, continue to grow your own organization and company. And so, of course, during COVID-19, we did have to pivot significantly just, again, to prioritize really the safety and health of our fellows. And so for Match, we actually moved this to May of 2020. And while we still have plans to potentially start it in April, so thus far, we still have sourced more than 200 job opportunities for the class of 2020, which was a higher percentage of job opportunities reflected in Match than in comparison to different national job boards. And for training camp, we actually made this a virtual experience for around 215 fellows. And we were able to successfully utilize a number of platforms so that people could still connect and so that they could still create and maintain a lot of those relationships with their fellow cohort. And in addition, throughout the fellowship, we're also continuing to coach different fellows, and we've also, again, migrated most of our in-city programming and entrepreneurship programming to a virtual environment so that different individuals have the flexibility of really tuning in from where they're at so that they don't necessarily have to go out. And then, of course, post-fellowship, we're continuing to engage fellow alums in virtual programming, like our mentorship programs, different roundtables, and so on and so forth, until it is safe to gather again. And so keep in mind that this has been at the top of our mind, and we are continuously evaluating the situation each and every day so that we can make the best decision possible that prioritizes your safety. And so all of that said, that's what a lot of VFA looks like in terms of really getting you connected to startups, really getting you launched in training camp, and what life as a VFA fellow looks like, especially during the fellowship, after, and even potentially starting your own company and organization. However, let's kind of hear from our fellows themselves. And so I'll right now turn it over to Riel, who can really monitor a lot of our conversation. However, first off, I'll let Aya introduce herself now that she's joined us. So Aya, if you want to give kind of an introduction to your name, your pronouns, and where you work and what city you're based in, we'll kick it off from there.
Awesome. Hi, everyone. My name is Aya. I am based in Detroit, Michigan, and I go by she, her, and I'm a 2019 fellow.
Absolutely. Thank you, Aya. All right, Riel, kicking it off to you.
All right, so just for everyone on the call, if you have any questions, you can drop them in the Q&A section as well, and then I can also group them so we can ask them on the panel. But my first question that I have for the two of you is, what has been the most impactful part thus far of being a VFA fellow?
I can go first, Aya. I think for me, it's definitely the community aspect. So whether that's during training camp, sort of getting to know your entire fellow cohort, or post-training camp, moving to Detroit or whatever your respective city may be, and really getting to know those fellows in your city, both in your year and older than you. Kind of the community that VFA builds in its cities has been incredible for both my personal life and my professional life, which is, I think, the goal. So.
Yeah, for me, I would have to say the mindset that I think VFA prepares you for in terms of being ready to really be an impactful part of your company's team. So I work for a local yoga studio here, and I have a very small team of people. I was at one point a marketing team of one, and it had a lot of impact on the way that the business looked, felt, and also how impactful we were to our community. And I think that VFA stresses a lot amongst its fellows, and also it's a common understanding, I think, among the fellows that are at least in my class, that you really are there to make an impact on your team, and to put your best foot forward every single day, because it really does make a difference to small businesses that you're working for.
Thank you. That was great. So we're getting quite a few questions around the kind of similar to same topic. So for each of you, I'd love to hear what made you choose to do VFA.
Yeah, for me, I actually found out about VFA kind of by chance. I was visiting Detroit and stumbled upon training camp, and met a lot of the fellows a year older than me that way. And kind of in the same vein as my previous answer, I was like, how did VFA get such an incredible group of people together? And I was really curious, and so I started kind of doing research on my own and finding out that, the reason I got along with these people so well is because we're all interested in the same thing. We all want to build really cool things, whether it's a company or help build a company that someone else started, or just make an impact on the city that you're living in. I think for me, yeah, it was definitely being able to see the culture that VFA brings, of really excellence, and making sure that everyone is kind of aligned and mission oriented. So
yeah, I think in the same vein as that, like I personally am entrepreneurship minded. I definitely am attracted to the startup life, but I think that the difference between so I worked for a startup incubator in California as like one of my first internships, and that was like such an exciting experience. And I was like, after that, I want to be around small businesses. It's really exciting. Everyone is like always on it, always ready to grind. And that kind of like energy was it was so awesome to also see like so many young people also having that kind of energy. I'd never seen that before. And actually one of my best friends applied for VFA, got to the final round, couldn't go, and was like, you need to go. And basically talked about it until I sat down and did the application. And amazingly enough, ended up getting all the way through all the final rounds of the interview. And I was really, really surprised with like sitting down in those rooms and talking to people and realizing how nice everyone was. I think like in my head, I kind of like chalked up everyone to be these super uber competitive, everyone started their own business, but like, no, truly, like there are a handful of people who were like transitioning from other jobs, who wanted a new opportunity, who wanted a fresh start. And it was just really, really refreshing to me to be around so many people like that. So ultimately, that's how I knew that VFA was a community of people I wanted to be around. I'd never been around so many young people who are so excited to like do something with themselves. So that was very cool.
See, your face not scary. All right, so another question that we have actually from the chat is since starting VFA, what is the largest change you noticed, whether within yourself or within VFA, like your fellowship class or, your city, I guess I would say?
That's a great question. I would say that the biggest change for me has been the capacity that I thought I had to do a lot. You go into helping a small business, whether you're on the marketing team, whether you're doing developing, whatever it is, like you think you can do a lot, and then they challenge you like, oh no, we need like 10 times more of that from you. And at first it's difficult, it's challenging, definitely, but I think that when you find a company that like you're aligned with their mission, you love what they're doing, you find a capacity within yourself to push even harder. And ultimately the reward of that is, so satisfying. So I would say that that's probably the biggest change. I don't think, when I look back at it, the amount of stuff that I've done in the past year, I'm shocked. I don't think I could have told myself that I could have done all of that a year ago. So I would say that's the biggest thing for me.
Yeah, and very similarly for me, I came straight from graduation to VFA. So I'm like finishing up my first year on the job, and just the amount of sort of experience and professionalism over the past year that you're kind of thrown into at a startup is you're expected to do everything and anything from day one. And I don't know if I was ready for that expectation immediately, but you kind of have to figure it out. So similar to Aya, looking back on the past year has been a huge sort of professional growth in a really astronomical way.
Great. All right. So another question is, what was it like having to like maybe move to a city you had never been to, that you may have not known anyone there? How did you deal with that, and like juggling, like finding housing, all of the things that come with moving to somewhere new that you may have not been to?
You want to go, Devin?
Yeah, sure. So I think, well, I and I both are in Detroit, and I think that our experience was maybe a little bit different because we got to spend the summer in Detroit before we moved here for training camp. So I'll kind of speak to our experience, and then also probably a more traditional VFA experience. But I live with 2 other fellows, as do most other fellows who I met during training camp. So we didn't know each other at all. We met, and then like a week later we were like, cool, so we gotta find a house. So we kind of started touring around the city, like picking places to look at, picking parts of the city that we thought we would like, doing a ton of research on the city. That was one thing that was incredibly important as we were looking for housing, but also even beyond that. Detroit has such an insane history, as do most VFA cities, and kind of being aware that you're entering a city that has existed for hundreds and hundreds of years before you and will continue to exist hundreds and hundreds of years after you, and kind of acknowledging your little impact on that. So yeah, we found a house through like a normal process, just looking online and touring and things like that. But I think the takeaway is the fellowship community was definitely very integral to that transition, and also research was very integral to that transition. I don't know, Aya, if you have similar feelings.
Yeah, I had an interesting experience. So like Devin, I was also in Detroit for training camp, which was awesome. But I think that like training camp was so intense that there were actually not too many opportunities to leave the campus that we were at. So I didn't get to explore the city as much. But also I moved here with my husband. So he's my live-in roommate. And I didn't have to worry about finding housing with anyone, but like I also did not get hired until the last week of training camp. So I was watching everyone like get together and, you know, find housing together and stuff like that. And I was just like, I don't even know where I'm gonna work. So I have to figure out what is the most convenient place for me to be. And like Devin, I did a lot of research and tried to figure out what would be the easiest thing to do, and ended up living downtown, and Detroit doesn't have the most amazing transportation system. So I needed to be able to like get on the freeway and get off real fast and have that at least be convenient. So I would say like the transition of moving was definitely interesting. I don't really have any family up here. This is the furthest north Midwest that I've ever been. I had never had like a super cold winter ever before. And it was interesting, but I definitely credit the fellows that I have here for creating a community and a group of people that like I enjoyed seeing all the time. Even though I didn't live with any fellows, I lived very close to fellows, so I could walk to them. We could go and hang out and stuff like that. And so I think that that definitely helps. They become your family, even if you don't have blood family in whatever city you're moving to. So.
Great, thank you. See, so insightful. Now I would like to throw it to Joel to answer a few questions. First, just around like, what are there, like, are there any like eligibility requirements to apply to be a VFA fellow?
Yeah, absolutely. So I noticed in the Q&A, y'all are kind of asking like, am I eligible? As well as how do we really partner with a lot of our company partners? And so just for the eligibility criteria, we typically accept individuals, at least for this class, no more than 3 years out of their undergraduate degree. So if you earned your undergraduate degree anywhere from 2018 to 2021, you are eligible to apply to this year's class. Now, that said, there can be exceptions made, just kind of depending on your circumstance. And if you would like to request an exception, then please feel free to email talent@ventureforamerica.org. And I'll also display that email at the end of the presentation. However, again, just kind of in terms of eligibility right now, we're currently accepting individuals who graduated no earlier than 2018. And again, you can request an exception if you would like to be reconsidered. And so just to kind of tackle Damien's questions, because I do feel that that is an important one. So our community directors are really in charge of forming that partnership with different organizations, Damien. And there are a set of guidelines that they're really going off by in order to really build those relationships and determine if that partnership is something that would add value to the VFA community. So for example, in those conversations, our community directors are asking, is this really a startup or a large multinational corporation? one of those is not a startup, right? So in that regard as well, like, is this fellow going to maybe have direct access to senior leaders or leadership so that they can be mentored and so that they can actually learn what it's like to kind of build an organization? The third factor often is, does this organization value diversity, equity, and inclusion? And that's becoming something more and more that our community directors are incorporating into those conversations. So again, you're absolutely right in that startups can vary in terms of culture, size, impact, and work. However, we do have different guidelines that we can use in order to determine those partnerships. And just to kind of tackle Amber's question, do VFA fellows have the option to stay with the company that they're matched with? Absolutely. So even after those 2 years are up, it's not like you're on a contract or anything. It's not like you're losing your employment. It simply just means that you're no longer obligated to really attend a lot of the professional development programming that your community director hosts for you. And so after those 2 years, you've merely graduated from the fellowship program, and that doesn't necessarily mean, that does not mean rather that you're out of a job. So if you love your job and if you want to stay, you absolutely have that option to do so. And in regards to, would this program be ideal for someone who has kids? So arguably that might depend on you in terms of whether like the contents of the program are really structured around, you know, your schedule and everything. So if working for 2 years at a startup organization is something that you are interested in, then I certainly think that that could still be worth exploring. So again, I think that that could primarily depend on you and what kind of your needs are, and whether this could be a good growth opportunity for you and whether you could make it work. And so all of that kind of said, in regards to other questions, for instance, what is the average age? A lot of our fellows, just kind of per our eligibility criteria, again, like are more within the entry level to early career stage. And so you are going to be surrounded by a lot of individuals who might have otherwise had graduated soon or have had like a few years of work experience and so on and so forth. However, again, like age truly is not a criteria, more so again, the graduation year. And so all of that kind of in mind, I think the last question I'll tackle for now is, can individuals also apply to VFA with the intention of working in one city? And so I think that for this particular question, I don't think that there's anything wrong with being intentional about a specific city that you truly want to work in. That said, I would really encourage you to be open-minded about the different career opportunities that you could really go to in multiple cities so that you're not narrowing down your options and choices. And so definitely think about that a little bit, at least before kind of considering the fellowship program, just so you can be open to good opportunities that could be good for your growth. And so with that kind of in mind, I hope that that answers a lot of questions around eligibility and criteria for now. Riel, I'll pass it over to you.
All right, great. So we have a question that's also in the chat. It's like, it says, how has VFA impacted your career path? Do you feel that did your prior experience prepare you to be at your startup?
I think for me, definitely my experience in sort of internships and undergrad prepared me to the best of their ability. But I don't know if anything really prepares you for being at a team of 20 people where a pandemic hits and you haven't had sales in 4 months, or where something needs done tomorrow and there's no one on your team who explicitly has the capability to do it, or it doesn't explicitly fall within their role. These are the kinds of things that happen at startups that you probably could never predict, and neither could your professors or anyone for that matter. So I think that VFA kind of gets you in that mindset that these kinds of things are going to happen, and does, to the best of their ability, train you to kind of react on the fly and react in ways that are productive rather than having a meltdown, which is also something that happens occasionally, but yeah.
Yeah, meltdowns are totally normal. They are okay. If that helps you, you know, process the craziness, that's just fine. But yeah, I would agree. I would say that like my degree was in literature and creative writing. I did internships for marketing. I did a startup incubator internship as well. So like I was familiar with the startup life. I can write, and generally I understood marketing, but there's nothing that teaches you how to like properly work in a startup environment than actually working in the startup environment. And I would say that because you're a VFA fellow and your company knows that, they are expecting you to work hard, but they're not expecting you to know anything unless you have like prior work experience. So there's going to be that cushion of like, hey, I'm here to learn, I'm here to absorb everything. But at some point, they're going to expect you to hit the ground running and just make mistakes and also learn as you go. So I would say if you don't have any prior work experience, it's okay. Just be prepared to learn a ton. In the first couple of months. They're going to be rough. Rough but fun. Rough but fun.
Great. So my next question is, okay, what would you say is like one piece of advice you would give someone who's like, all right, I'm sold, I'm applying. What would one piece of advice you would give them?
It sounds so cheesy, but just be like as genuinely yourself through the whole process as you can be. It's sometimes really stressful, the application process. You have, I'm sure, 1,000 other things going on in your life. The only thing you can do is do your absolute best to kind of represent your experiences, but also be really authentic, because that's the only way that you're gonna be successful.
Yeah, I would agree with that 100%. Because I think throughout the application process, you will realize that it's either for you or not for you, because the application process is so intense. And it's okay if it's not for you. It is not for some people. But if it is for you, then amazing, and you're going to do great. I would say another piece of advice would be to really think about the kind of impact that you want to have at each one of these companies, because you're not just there to like make money. Like at a lot of companies, you're probably going to be making less than you would at like a huge corporation. And a lot of people, I think, struggle with the idea of like not being paid their worth, quote unquote. But think about it in the terms of like you are building worth, you're building that stuff. And so to really like, don't be discouraged by like, oh, this is not a huge company, or this is not well known, or it's not really the startup environment that I thought it was going to be, because you are truly building your resume in so many different ways that you probably don't even realize until those 2 years are up. So just kind of like take that through your application process as you're looking at potential companies to that are on, you know, the VFA roster and stuff like that. Don't think about, oh, it's too small or oh, it's too big. Just think about the kind of impact that you want to have when you're at these companies, because that's what they're looking for when they get you.
That's great. Joel, do you have like one tidbit you would add?
Yeah, absolutely. So I definitely agree with Aya. Like, it really does kind of depend on your needs and what you really want to do, because the core part of the fellowship is truly in that you do get to experience what life can potentially be like at a startup organization or startup opportunity. And so if you are interested in potentially really building a business, then absolutely, like, check it out. If your pathway does more so really veer into like a larger organization, then, it might be time to reevaluate. So all of that said, again, it really depends on what your needs are and what you kind of want to end up doing. A lot of our fellows oftentimes work in a variety of different roles like marketing, project management, software engineering, operations, and so on and so forth. And so it does really provide a lot of that heavy experience that you can use for the rest of your career. And it really just depends on where you see your future pathway. I think that one thing that I always ask people is, what are your goals and motivations that you kind of see for yourself, with the understanding, of course, that this can change. And so, I think asking you all, like, if you are potentially considering this as an opportunity, what are some of those goals and motivations do you have? And do those kind of align with our program at the end of the day, which is exactly what we look out for. So that's kind of what I would say in terms of advice.
Great. Those were all of my questions. Let me check to see if we got any new questions while I was speaking. Oh, this question is specifically for you. How did creative writing help you? And because it's their major as well. So how did it help you in your role that you currently have?
Yeah, hey to creative writing majors, woo woo. Yeah, so I would say it helped a ton. So basically, a lot of what my job consists of is Instagram captions, thinking creatively about how to display information. Like that creative part of your brain, especially if you're going into a marketing role, is going to basically be going into overdrive all the time. And it's a muscle that you'll be working a lot. And even if that is your strength, playing that up even more as like, it played for me into how to write email campaigns and stuff like that. So literally anything where you are writing, you're using your creative writing skill. And just being able to refine that and be really concise with your words and stuff like that, like all of that is extremely crucial to being able to do a good job in marketing. So it really helped me. I would not be able to do my job if I did not have creative writing. So you're in the right major, my friend.
Great. All right. Well, all right. Those are all of my questions, and the majority of the questions for this question and Q&A section. There are some very specific Q&A questions, and we will spend some time answering those individually.
Yeah, no, for sure. So I think just kind of wrapping this all up, everyone. So in terms of like different questions, you don't have to stay at the same startup for 2 years. While of course, like it is kind of that expectation, like if things aren't really working out between you and your role, or if for some reason like your startup winds down, then absolutely switching jobs is definitely an option that you can talk more about with your respective community director. And so all of that said, in terms of Matthew's question regarding building your own startup. So in terms of like a lot of what VFA can offer during the fellowship is really a lot of that skills building. So really giving you the opportunity to kind of master different kinds of skill sets so that can aid you while building up your organization. It is a little bit tricky though to kind of work full time and still start up your organization. So again, like I think that it kind of really nails down to like what your needs are. And so all of that kind of said, I think that those are a lot of the main questions. And I think just kind of closing us out, Aya and Devin, what are some of the things that you're looking forward to at VFA since you're pretty much 1 year and a few months in?
I am very excited for my company, which is also kind of cheesy, but I have kind of a role change happening in the next few months. which is something that's really awesome and happens a lot in startups. Is you kind of move and shift as they need you to. So our team saw a need, and I'm kind of going to grow into that role, which is something that's really exciting. Yeah.
Yeah, Aya, what about you?
Yeah, so kind of in the same vein, I also had a role shift in the past couple of months, and it's been awesome. So I'm really excited to just really like, I've developed a certain role for almost an entire year, and being able to develop that role even more and shape it to what I want and make it successful is really exciting. And also, my company is going through some really exciting changes and adding new products. So it's really cool to be a part of lots of new things happening on lots of different levels. So
Yeah, no, awesome. Well, thank you, Devin and Aya, for really expressing and sharing your views. And everyone, kind of before we end, like, please send some love to them in the chat for like sharing their stories and everything. However, I think just to kind of end things off, so in that sense, there we go. In terms of next steps, y'all, we'll be sending out a follow-up email just so, again, you can have this recording and so you have all information at your disposal. And within the follow-up email, there'll be a survey that you can take in order to really give any kind of feedback that you may have regarding the presentation or anything that you might have wanted to see more of. And so please don't hesitate to stay in touch. We love hearing from individuals such as yourselves who are interested in this, who might have other different kinds of ideas, and feel free to reach out at talent@ventureforamerica.org. I promise that me, Riel, Devin, and Aya are not artificial intelligence. Someone on the team will get back to you. However, aside from that, everyone, truly thank you all so much for your time and for spending a part of your evening with us. We hope that everyone stays safe and well, and that you all have a great rest of your week. However, aside from that, thank you again for coming, and we'll talk to you soon.
thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye, everyone.